Hello my friends all the way around the world and back again. We're in my mini kitchen and today we're going to be doing beeswax wraps. Okay, so I've decided to do a voiceover because there was too much crinkling from the baking paper going on and you couldn't actually hear what I was saying. So I'm just reinvigorating the beeswax wraps, and I do it by ironing method. So I've got pre-cut, already beeswaxed, and I was just adding some more beeswax because they needed a little bit more. I used just pure beeswax, no other ingredients. And what I was showing you there was a method that I tried that had failed. I thought that by melting them in a pot it would be easier to use then as liquid, but it didn't work out too good. So I was just placing the beeswax itself out of that pot that I'd already melted onto the baking sheet and then ironing it between another layer of baking sheet. And as I said, I don't use anything but beeswax. I don't use jojoba oil, I don't use pine resin. That's what a beekeeper taught me, so that is what I have been doing. So those bits were in the jar. As I say, I'm going to use those up now because I had melted some pellets into the jar thinking it would work by painting it on with a brush, but it didn't. So I am now crumbling that back up, and what I find is if you put a little bit more in the middle and then when it melts it could have sort of works its way towards the edges. But if you have too much, then you could always put another clean piece of cotton over the top to absorb the excess. So we're just letting it melt. And actually I do find that the big iron is quite hefty, and I really keep saying that I'm going to get a travel iron, but just keep forgetting. I think a travel iron would be so much simpler and easier to use because the squares aren't that big. So all I've done is measured my bowl, or the main bowl or items that I would put in the fridge, and then I've cut out about an excess of 2 inches around the edge before I then wax them. And then after I've waxed them and cooled them, I then use pinking shears to go around the edge, just to make sure they don't fray. And then to activate them, you would just scrunch them up before you place them on the bowl. And it is your heat from your hands that activate them. So there I'm just explaining to you, well at least I was before the voiceover, I was explaining to you that I would just cut 2 inches extra around the size of my bowl. But actually what I learnt later on was small plates, I think they're called tea plates, I don't know what you call them where you are, but tea plates tend to go, the bottom of the tea plate tend to sit on top of the bowl, or do in some circumstances. And I found that if I used the template, the actual plate as the template for the bowl, it was the right size. So, but you cut them to whatever size you want. And these were the pellets, so these are food grade pellets, bought off eBay I think they were. And this is obviously in the UK. So you can just sprinkle the pellets on, and if you've already got, you're adding more beeswax to pre-beeswaxed items, then you're not going to need as much. If you're doing it to a fresh piece, then you might need a little bit more because the cotton will absorb, and always use cotton. And pre-wash it, don't put any detergents or comfort softeners on it, it just needs to be plain washed and dried. No chemicals on it basically, because that would defeat the point. So, but But it's just so much easier to do and so much more fulfilling, I think, to make your own, and you can make as many as you like. And people don't, either because they don't think they can, they don't know how to, or they're just afraid to, or they just can't be bothered. Not sure which one it is. And just be careful when you pick them up because they are still quite warm. You do kind of have a little bit of Teflon fingers going on. But I tend to look at what I need in my fridge, what I buy that I put in my fridge. I'm so conscientious. Every month I try to change 5 things towards sustainability or towards less use of single-use plastic. And this was my one for cling film 1 month. And if you go over to my blog, which is, I'll put it in the description box. If you go over to my blog, I have done a blog on sustainability, on how you can start to make changes in your house to give you some ideas. And this was one of my 5, the challenge of 5 I do every month. I challenge myself 5 items, 5 things to change. And this was one of them. So I'm really pleased that I've achieved it. Now also, those are charm pack squares, and those are really great for smaller items, like lemons or half a lemon, ends of cucumbers and tiny bits, you know, the tiny bits, avocado, that one's not quite big enough for an avocado, but little bits, you know, the little ends of cheese and the little ends of cucumbers or the end of a celery or something, or a little bit of celery or whatever. Anyway, smaller sized pieces is where I was going with that. Just waft it dry. I mean, there was, as I said, there's no pine resin. I don't put any additives or anything in beeswax because it is automatically antibacterial. And what was I going to say? Yeah, that's to activate it right there. That's how you activate it. Just scrunch it up. I don't even think you need to do that, but that's what I've watched and most people do, so you just follow along, don't you, really, like sheep, the sheep that we are. And what I found was the more material you have, like that's quite a big piece of material for a small jar, but what I found is that they do hold together better when you put material on material. So when the material is bigger and larger than the item, then it does actually stick a lot better. And it's just the warmth of your hands, and it does take a minute, the warmth of your hands that actually keep it on there. And you can make sandwich bags and all sorts. There's so many videos out there. I'm not going to go along all of those, but this is the size bowl that I would normally put in my fridge, and I have cut that, as you can see, a little bit larger. Takes a little bit of just warming it up to place it, and that looks so much prettier in the fridge, don't you agree? And again, you could write on with a food grade pencil, you could write on different wraps for different things so that you know when you look at the wrap, because you can't see what's inside of it, you know what's inside of it. So on there I could have wrote with an ink pen, you know, food marker, what was each wrap used for. And then to keep them, I just roll them up into some baking paper when they're not in use and tie them. And that keeps them nice. And then I would normally place them in the drawer or back in the box that the baking paper came out of, actually. And then I've got some really long ones that I use for cucumber and celery. So much just comes in flipping packaging these days, it's bonkers. So that's another thing on my list of things to achieve next week, other than growing my own, which I do. And again, those, I was finished that sentence, is to buy everything without packaging from farmers markets, etc. So what I was showing you there was 2 squares that you could sew together. You could sew 4 together if you've only got that size to hand. Okay, so some bonus tips for you that when you've completed your project, keep your beeswax, let it go cold on the sheet, and then pick it off. Then reuse your beeswax, then you can reuse that piece of paper. The beeswax comes off really, really easily, so no waste at all. You can just put it in a glass jar or put it back in the container that you keep your beeswax in, and then you can reuse the paper. To keep your beeswax wraps clean, just run them under cold water and reuse them.